First and foremost, I would like to thank Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Go to squarespace.com/Daniel Schiffer or use the code Daniel Schiffer to get 10% off your first purchase. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and welcome to a new tutorial which will hopefully help you make some better videos. Now, in today's video, we'll be going over a few little different tips and tricks for getting sharper footage or sharper looking footage. Now, I will be using the word sharp or sharpness throughout this video very loosely, but just keep in mind that all I mean by this is more detailed and punchy, crispy looking shots. But I think you guys get the idea, so here are 7 tips for getting punchier or crispier looking videos. When it comes to sharper or getting more detailed looking videos, our first tip might seem a little bit counterintuitive. Tip number 1 is to eliminate the internal sharpening that your camera automatically adds to your videos. And the reason we do this, aside from internal sharpening just looking very cheap, is that it can actually ruin the finer details within your shot. So now that we have internal sharpening removed from our image completely, what are some other ways we can get some more detailed looking footage? For tip number 2, we'll be talking about what is known as the sweet spot. What a lot of people don't know is that pretty much every lens has what is called a sharpest aperture or sweet spot. For the longest time, I always just used the lowest f-stop on my lens because I didn't know any better. I thought that lets in the most light, so therefore it's the best looking image you can get. But little did I know that if you adjust your f-stop down by 2 or 3 stops, this will give you the sharpest possible image out of that lens. For example, if the lens that you're using is an f1.4, then you will get the sharpest possible image out of that lens if your f-stop is set between f2.8 and f4. Now, when it comes to aperture, it's very easy to get all of the different stops confused, whether that's full stops, half stops, 1/3 stops. So if you're interested, I'll have a full f-stop chart linked down below. Even if you don't necessarily want to stop down by 2 or 3 full stops, just stopping down by a little bit, whether that's a half stop or a few third stops, can work wonders for broadening up that depth of field and getting more of your subject in focus. Now onto tip number 3. If you've got some cash that you're willing to spend, or if you're looking into buying a new lens, consider getting yourself a prime lens. Prime lenses, for those of you who don't know, are lenses that do not zoom and they have a fixed focal length. Now, what is great about primes is that they tend to be a bit more affordable than zooms, and they often have even better low light capabilities for their given price. And the kicker is that prime lenses are generally sharper than zoom lenses because they perform exceptionally well at their given focal length. Now, if you're a Canon user, you have tons of lens options out there to choose from, ranging in all kinds of prices, but for Sony users and Micro Four Thirds users, I highly recommend picking up the Sigma 16mm f1.4. Now, even though this lens is made for APS-C and Micro Four Thirds, I still use it in crop mode on my Sony a7 III, a full frame camera, because I just love this lens. I love the sharpness, I love the quality, I love the color, the contrast, the focus is great, everything about it. Highly recommended. Now, moving along to tip number 4 for getting sharper looking videos, you should try and backlight your subject. Backlighting doesn't literally make your video sharper, but it can create the illusion of a sharper video because of the way backlighting can shape and enhance the outline of a subject. For backlighting, there is no need for any sort of expensive equipment. You can simply use a floor lamp like I am in this shot, or if you're filming some products, you can use your phone's flashlight just out of frame to backlight it, and that will give it that extra little pop. Now moving on, tip number 5 might actually be the most effective tip of the whole bunch, but you're gonna wanna be careful as to when you're using it. When getting that opening shot of the cooking sequence, I noticed that the bag looked kind of blurry. The shot was bothering me so much because in my head, I wanted it to be tack sharp so you could see exactly what was written on the bag, and I really wanted the subject and the focus to be as clear as possible and have it stand out from the background. Now here is the exact same shot after making one little change, and and notice how much sharper and detailed the bag looks. And the way I was able to do this was by breaking the 180-degree shutter rule. What happened was the first shot I got was following the 180-degree shutter rule, as it was captured using a shutter speed of 1/250, which is about 1 over double my frame rate of 120 frames per second. Following this rule gives you the most natural looking motion blur in your shots, making them appear more realistic. The problem in this case was that the speed at which the bag was being lifted out of the fridge was actually quick enough that there was too much motion blur. So instead what I did was I used a shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, and if we put the freeze frames side by side for comparison, you can really see the difference in the amount of detail we get. And here are a few other shots from the same sequence that also follow this technique. So this is a scenario where it actually makes sense to break the rules, and I only recommend doing this if there is a specific intention for it. Otherwise, I would suggest that you stick with the 180-degree shutter rule for most of your shots, as this will give you the most professional looking videos. So those were a few things that you can do in camera to get some more crispy looking footage, but if after all of that you still want your videos to look sharper, here is what you can do in post.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Now, before we get into our last two tips, I would like to quickly tell you about my website, filmer.ca. On my website is where both my viewers and potential clients can learn more about me, see past examples of my work, and get in touch with any questions or inquiries. For a few years now, I've been using Squarespace to build all of my websites long before they ever reached out to me, and today they are offering my viewers 10% off your first purchase. I feel like too many people nowadays are relying on Instagram and social media as the main way of attracting clients and showcasing their portfolio. But if I am being honest, most of my serious inquiries come through my website through the contact submission form. And one of the biggest advantages of using a website over social media for your business is that you can use search engine optimization to your advantage, so that people who are actively looking for your creative services can actually find you. So no matter what type of work you do or what kind of business you're running, Squarespace has you covered because they have so many options, layouts, and templates to choose from. So once again, head over to squarespace.com/Daniel Schiffer or use the code Daniel Schiffer. Start your free trial today and get 10% off your first purchase. Tip number 6 is to use curves to create micro contrast in your shots, similar to how you would use a clarity slider in Lightroom. Now at first, using curves can be a little bit tricky, but if you play around with the different parts of the curve, you can make your subject pop and enhance those finer details in your image. Now, if your footage still isn't looking sharp enough for you, we can use tip number 7, which is our last resort, and that is to add sharpening in post. Now, it's definitely not a great idea to go ahead and sharpen every single clip in your video, but if there is a shot here and there that can use a little extra boost, there's nothing wrong with adding a sharpen filter or effect and applying it with a low intensity to get that extra little crispiness that you're looking for. So those were our 7 tips for getting sharper or more detailed looking footage. I tried to keep them as practical as possible so that anyone can go out and give them a try. But that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Follow me on Instagram at Daniel.Schiffer, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.